Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Rolka. Thank you for joining me for questions from comments 40. I cannot keep the smile from my face. I have some amazing questions, some great observations, and I'm going to get started. Thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. If you haven't yet, that would be amazing. I would greatly appreciate it, and it really helps the channel. There are, of course, other ways to support my channel. Those do include Patreon, where you can get MP3s and PDFs of the exercises that I release in my sort of normal warm-up video sort of workout things. That's all in the description. You can check that out if you like. So, questions from comments 40. Thanks for the video and recipe, Jeff. Then this person is referring to this ginger honey lemon tea that I make, kind of in the usually you could have it anytime you like, really, but usually in the colder seasons when you're feeling a bit cold and fluey maybe and things like that. Speaking of which, you'll notice my apparel is different from normal. It's getting colder here, so I'm changing my apparel. Anyway, I used to do it with a dash of whiskey as well. Do you think that adding that to the combo helps the vocal cords? Other question, I don't understand why lemon is good in this recipe as it's quite acid, and that's not good for the vocal cords. Sorry to come to this lovely recipe with these quite annoying questions, but can't help to wonder them. Thanks again. So, first of all, not annoying at all. That's what this is all about. So please ask your questions. I can't really talk about the whiskey. Like to each his own. I believe that's called a hot toddy, if I'm not mistaken. And that is a generations time-honored tradition. So if that is serving your vocal needs, then who am I to say one way or the other? The lemon. First of all, and I don't know, it's been a while since I've done that video. I'd have to take a look at it. And I'll put a link on screen here too if you want to go check it out. I think it's a very nice remedy. We're talking about literally drops in a fairly sizable quantity of liquid. Now, my understanding, and I'm not a chemist, I'm a musician here, but my understanding is to balance the sweetness of the honey. So for some of us, and I would count myself as one of that us, when I have sweet things, I get a bit, kind of phlegmy and goopy. And that literally drops of lemon can help to balance that out so that I don't get such a mucal response to the sugars that are, in the honey. Now, if you're putting whiskey, that could have an additional mucal response. So you'll want to gauge that. If you're using this as a remedy to help with your singing voice, try out your various combinations and recipes, and then see what suits your voice best. At the end of the day, that is the most important thing. What serves your voice the best? Hey Jeff, first of all, thank you for all your videos. I use them every day. They are just great. You are very, very welcome. Thank you for your kind words. I am practicing the zone of the passaggio these days, and I have one question. So I usually, zona di passaggio is how I usually refer to it, but that's correct too. Is it normal that the transition flows and my voice seems to mix nice when I lip trill, but as soon as I try to do the same exercise with vowels, it is much harder to smooth out the change of register? Thanks a lot. Yes, and if I might add once more, yes. This is why I usually talk about when I talk about the lip trill, I will almost always say it's not the end-all be-all of vocal exercises. It takes some translation to get it from what you can do with the lip trill to what you can do when you are singing vowel sounds. Now, I work on that, I believe, in Lip Trill Madness 2. In Lip Trill Madness 1, it's mostly just lip trilling, and it's kind of just getting into that as an exercise. But in 2, I work on the transition. And the thing to keep in mind, the lip trill is what's called a semi-occluded vocalization. it is similar to straw phonation, or if you trill your R's, you do that tongue trill thing, as opposed to that. And these occlusions take some of the weight of the air column off of the vocal folds. This allows the vocal folds to change shape more easily, and that is the huge benefit to them. It is that ease of change that we are looking for when we're using these exercises, particularly when it comes, as this individual has asked, when it is in regards to registration event practice, going across the registers. So it's totally normal to work with it. You can try doing hybridized exercises. There's a few on my channel where you start off with lip trill, and you can kind of carry on that way in each of the exercises. And you could do that with a video that is a lip trill video, or you could do an upper register singing video, but instead of doing the vowels both directions, just do the lip trill on the first part of the exercise and then release to the vowel that I'm asking for in the exercise to get that practice in. It's gonna take some practice. It is a transition. Focus on that feeling of registration event change when you're doing the lip trill. That's what you want to clue into, want to pay attention to, and then try to replicate it in your vowel practice. Great question, great observation. Really appreciate you posting that. Really great stuff. Love your vids. How do I protect my voice from weather like colds and such? Thanks in advance. Well, you will notice my change of garb. It has grown a little colder here, and so I will affect some neck coverage. This is also a wool jumper, and I have an undershirt underneath it too. And I get cold. I get really, really cold, and the rooms that I find myself making videos in, I make the video where the piano is mostly. So it's kind of cooler in here, and it doesn't really retain heat. But then oddly enough, when it gets too hot, it seems to just go way overboard so really quickly. So it's hard for me to get the temperature just where I like it. And I take to wearing a jumper or wearing a scarf. If it's really chilly, I'll wear fingerless gloves as well. But the point here is to try to maintain a comfortable body temperature. Staying hydrated, washing your hands frequently. If you are around people that have colds, you might want to try and keep a little bit of distance. I know we just kind of got over that, but if you're a vocalist, professional or otherwise, then protect your voice. Maybe, if a lot of people are going to be sick at a function, maybe skip that one, or wash your hands really frequently. I don't want to be the one to suggest wearing a mask, but, it wouldn't look terribly out of place these days, depending on where you are. And that might be a solution as well. It's never been more common for people to walk around wearing masks. I, for one, try to steer clear of any time when I think that people have colds or the flu or anything like that. I obviously use my voice a lot. It is what I do on this channel. It is also a huge part of my personal and, satisfactory artistic life. It's what I do in enjoyment and in self-satisfaction as well as professionally. So I'm very, very conscious of my voice. I would encourage you to just consider carefully your environment, stay hydrated, make sure that you're keeping yourself warm if you are given to being cold, or just in general, manage your temperature, and just take really good care of yourself over the winter months. They don't last for terribly long, depending on where you are in the world. And once you're through the other side, you can enjoy that summer sun and have had full function of your voice the whole time. Thanks for all of your videos. My main question, as always, is how do I take care of my voice? Also, is there an exercise to decrease the vibrato in my voice? It's very subtle, but I notice it. Thanks in advance. So in terms of taking care of your voice, if you're talking about environmental considerations, I kind of just went over that, so you might go back to that question and have a listen there. If you're talking about from a performance standpoint and just the overall use of your voice, having a daily practice where you are working on vowel alignment, working on passagio, working on really good registration event practices will help you to avoid doing damage when you are singing. So I would highly recommend you have a daily practice of vocalizations. The vibrato thing is a little bit interesting. Vibrato is the natural occurrence of a well-aligned system. So when you have a good relationship between the airflow and the vocal fold closure, in other words, the subglottic air pressure and the adduction of the vocal folds, when they are balanced very nicely, they tend to oscillate and kind of wobble against one another, and you get vibrato. So vibrato is a really great thing to have in your voice. It is showing that things are aligning nicely, that you're getting good balance. So you want to take it out. That is an inherently imbalanced usage of your voice, and yet it is very, very popular and common to hear in a lot of song forms. My advice to you is to work on it on a case-by-case basis for whatever song or section of song that you want to not have the vibrato. And unfortunately, it's going to require a little bit of experimentation, because what you will have to do is institute a slightly heavier vocal fold adduction, a slightly heavier closure of the vocal mechanism. And that will then keep the oscillation from occurring, keep the vibrato from occurring. How does one do this? A little bit of experimentation. And you want to only use as much firmness as you absolutely have to. What would that sound like? I'm not really trying to do anything. I'm letting these things occur, and you can hear the vibrato in my voice. Now, if I push into that a little bit, I don't really practice taking vibrato out that much. And you could even hear when I first established the pitch, it was still oscillating a little bit, and then I pushed a little bit more. What does that feel like? It feels a little bit like pushing more from my rectus abdominis muscles, and also a kind of pulling back, if you will, like a sort of pulling back is the best way I can put it, around the larynx. This is imbalanced. So a little bit goes a long way. And again, I would suggest using it only on a case-by-case basis, or for one song, for example, or a part of a song. And I would highly suggest that you carefully consider the lack of vibrato when you are at a higher tessitura, because that imbalance can lead to vocal fatigue over time. I don't think it would do any harm in the short term, but habits like that tend to compound and could create problems as you move forward. So be careful with your voice. Treat it nicely. The vibrato is a good thing. Love your vibrato. It's lovely. Vibrato is great. In addition to vocal and music pedagogy, your videos show knowledge regarding music amplification and recording. Thus, my question, do recording and amplifying systems have a sort of formant equivalent as to enhance some frequencies and suppress others? Amplified or recorded Luciano Pavarotti's voice had a sort of metallic edge, but live, the voice was clear with a ping similar to striking a crystal wine glass. Placido Domingo's voice sounds pretty much the same live or amplified. Unamplified voice always better, in my humble opinion. That's right, I don't really talk about it too terribly much, but I am also a recording engineer. I did a 2-year internship at a recording studio in San Francisco, California, and remained there for several years recording, doing engineering things, aligning 2-inch 24-track tape decks poorly, but still doing it. Primarily working in Pro Tools, doing a smattering of stuff with ADAT, but not much, and all kinds of things. And I've had the pleasure of recording lots of different individuals, singer-songwriters and bands and different genres, and it was an incredible experience, and I'm grateful for it. Yes is the answer to your question. It is called EQ, or equalization, and You can, as a recording engineer, boost certain frequency responses or take them away. You can work globally across the entirety of everything you're hearing, or if you have all of the recorded elements in a multi-track format, then you can boost or cut that EQ right on that single individual's track. So now in the case of vocals, most of the singer's formant happens, and it varies depending on voice, between around 2 kilohertz and 5 kilohertz. The higher voices will have that singer's formant at the higher kilohertz area. The lower singers' voices will have it lower down. And if you boost in that area, then you will get more of it. If you cut, then you will get less of it. And even in vocalists that do not have a lot of singer's formant response in their voice, you can boost those aspects in the mix, and it will help them project in the mix. For those of you who are working on your own recordings, if you are mixing your own projects, which I would heartily recommend you do, even if you do pay someone to mix it, do your own mix as well and compare and contrast the two. If you have a vocalist or you yourself are finding that the volume of everything seems to sit right, but the voice still isn't popping out, take your EQ and look in that 2 to 5 kilohertz area and give it a little bit of nudge up and see what happens. It will project out of the mix without having to disturb the balance of the mix. In other words, all of the elements will kind of remain in their relative volumes, but you'll have just pushed that vocalist and possibly yourself out of the texture a little bit. And it's really quite stunning when you first get the knack for investigating that. I think a lot of the vocal plugins that are vocalist dedicated probably do that automatically. Some of them are kind of expensive though. So if you're just working with the compressors and EQ that come with your digital audio workstation, your DAW, as it were, then take one band of your EQ or pull up another plugin with the EQ on it and give it a little bit of a boost. It's also worth mentioning too, in this question, that the microphone will have an impact. And in live recordings such as this, which may have been done with Pavarotti or Placido Domingo, if it was live in a hall, then the acoustic response of the hall will also impact on the sound of their voices. But microphones do a lot as well, and the frequency response of the microphone you are using has a dramatic impact on whether or not your voice has ping or doesn't, or just doesn't really sound very satisfying, or sounds really, really satisfying. This is why when it comes to choosing a microphone, when you want to choose a microphone that you're going to use in your studio, and especially if you're choosing that microphone for your voice, you want to be able to try it first. And there's no one that can tell you that mic is the mic for you. No, that mic. It doesn't work like that. Of all the things that have changed over the years, the thing that I think is most challenging for the vocalist when it comes to choosing microphones, because there just aren't that many stores that you can try a microphone out at and then choose to buy it or not. So many things are done online, and you can't always, returning them can be expensive or it can be difficult. So check your return policies carefully. Do your research. Audio Lunchbox, I think, is a great website, a great resource for listening to examples of microphones before you decide what's your short list of mics that you're going to try to select from. But at the end of the day, it's just you and the microphone, and that, the one microphone for one person might be great. It might not be for you. It might be too, but you've got to try it out if you can at all. Try it first. So EQ and microphones have a dramatic impact on the sound of the recorded voice. Can you explain what you mean by hollow to narrow? Also, when you suggest starting lower in a comfortable range, are you still in head voice? Or to go ahead and use chest voice as well. So, from the bottom to the top, if I'm saying start in a comfortable range, this is the most comfortable place for your voice, chest voice. And I would suggest it is the narrowest middle section of your chest voice. Not like the lower end of it, nor even the higher end of it, but right smack dab in the middle. If I'm talking about the most comfortable area of your voice, that's what I'm talking about. Hollow to narrow are talking about two different things. Narrow vowels are the vowel in balance as it pertains to the range that you are in. So, for example, if I am here with my voice, those are narrow vowels. That's how I would sing them. There's no modification happening to any of those for any of those notes. But as I move here, I have to start to make some accommodations for the notes just at the tops of those scales. Otherwise, the vowels as they are down here in this area of my voice, which is more comfortable, then those vowel shapes will be too tight. They will not sound as good. They will not have the singer's formant in them to the degree that I like and I think is appropriate for my voice. They will sound out of tune even if I'm in tune. And as I continue to move up, it would get harder and harder to sing if I kept those vowels the same narrowness as if I were speaking them. So narrowness, depending on whom you're speaking to, might be referring to the speaking voice and how those vowels would be spoken. When I am talking about having narrow vowels, I am talking about having that vowel balanced for the range that you are in. So when you are here, that's narrow. When I'm here, I have to modify ever so slightly at the top of that, but it is still balanced. And so I'm still using a narrow vowel sound for that range. A sound that's not narrow for there might be, where it's very breathy. Or it might want to be very head voicey and have that sort of cricothyroid dominant is head voice, maybe that affectation. To have a sort of lighter, fluffier sound to my voice. That is not narrow as well. There's an old saying, I don't know exactly how it goes, but it's like, there's one way to do it right and thousands of ways to do it wrong. What we're looking for here, because there's like loads and loads of ways that it could be done incorrectly. What we're looking for is for the vowel to have the same performance and the same color and tone to your voice as we move from register to register to register. That's the gauge for what narrow is, so that you have this seamless presentation across the various ranges of your voice. Hollow, I usually use when I'm talking about beginning registration event practices, and that would sound like this. You. You notice it's only the first pitch. You. That's a hollow sound. To me, it sounds hollow. You might use a different word to describe it. If we were working together in a lesson, as long as you were making the right sound, I would say that's fine. You don't have to use the word that I'm using. You could say whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as you make the association to the right sound in your voice. How do you determine if you're making the right sound? Well, that comes up in another question, but in short, you might have to record yourself or maybe see if you can get a consultation or a lesson with someone that can help you with that. But if they're not practicing registration event practices, it might not work out so well. So you'll have to talk to that individual and find out if that's going to work. Moving on. Would you know if it's possible to improve the timbre of a voice? If so, what exercises might improve it? Absolutely. That's basically my whole channel. It's part of it, right? The timbre comes along with good vowel alignment, with good passagio. Work on the exercises on my channel listening for matches between the vowels, assessing your voice for balance. And there's many, many videos online that can help you work on this. I mean, I meant to say on my channel, but that's true online. Like, if you don't like my videos that deal with these things, I would keep looking. There's going to be someone out there that's going to address the subject in a way that will help you. But that's basically the entire thing that my channel is focused on, is helping you get the most use of your voice with the most pleasant sound that you can. So I would say dive in. The water is quite fine. Sometimes something you say just sails by me as I concentrate on only a part of it. To wit, we don't seem to be able to consciously control the laryngeal muscles to thin the chords the way that we can see and feel our hands when we are keeping the wrists up, or perhaps see and feel the fingering of a guitar or violin. I think we seek the feel of what produces the sound we want. But how did you hear what you were doing when you mimicked the sound you wanted? Our own perception of our singing voice is notoriously often not the same as what the audience hears. Did you have the help of a teacher or recording for feedback as to what sound you produced? If you went by perceived sound during or while you were singing, I can see getting pitch, ease of transition, and perhaps clearness of tone, but not the tone or timbre itself. How did you do it? I woke up at 5 a.m. and this popped into my head, so I added a comment. Well, thank you. I think it's a great comment. I think it's an incredibly acute observation of the process of working on a voice. And I answered briefly in the comments section, and I mentioned it briefly just a moment ago. But to go more in depth, I had all of those things. I had teachers. I had recordings. I had the assurance, and I will share that assurance with you too, that the internal sound is different from the external sound, particularly when you are singing above the secondo passaggio. A certain amount of that hollowness that is in the exercises when you're beginning that practice still gets retained. And it is very easy to listen to a vocalist singing high notes and then attributing a sensation or a sound that you think you want to hear inside your head and trying to mimic that. And almost inevitably, this ends up with using too much vocal fold adduction, too much vocal fold strain, and causing problems, not necessarily like medical problems or anything like that, but just registration event problems, intonation problems. Over time, it could perhaps like develop into a sort of habit that could have some strain on the vocal folds, on the voice. But usually, we just don't get the notes right, or they're extremely inconsistent or out of tune, which isn't really usable. Like we need to sing in tune. So yes, I had all of those things. I would highly recommend doing regular recordings. You don't have to do it every day. Once every week, maybe. Once a fortnight, every 2 weeks is really great too. This gives you time to practice the techniques in between so that you can have time to just incorporate the practices into your singing practice. I think it helps to have an appogio breath management practice that runs hand in hand with your registration event practices. This will make sure that you are really doing good engagement, you've got good airflow below the vocal folds, good subglottic air pressure, and that gives the vocal folds the best chance to have more release and be able to elongate as is appropriate or contract as is appropriate, because we don't want them elongated when we're in a range where they should be contracted, nor do we want the vice versa. We want them to be flexible. And that, I would posit, is really what this is all about, is about being flexible to create the sound, the timbre, be in tune, be in the range you want. We want to be flexible with how we have operation of our voice. So really, really beautiful question. Thank you for posting. I appreciate that. Oops, pushed the wrong button there. Hey, Jeff, I'm curious whether or not the secondo passaggio is the break itself or the note before the break. I consistently break at G4, but I'm uncertain whether or not this means my secondo passaggio is in fact G4 or the note before G4. The secondo passaggio is said to be the last point before you are cricothyroid dominant. So depending on the efficiency of your vocal mechanism, when you are figuring out what your break is, then yes, like the break and the secondo passaggio would be synonymous. The space leading up to the secondo passaggio is referred to as the zona di passaggio. It can also be referred to as mix range, but this gets confusing because a lot of teachers will refer to cricothyroid dominant singing or head voice as mix range too. And in truth, it is. There is cricothyroid activity as well as thyroarytenoid dominant activity. So thyroarytenoid is the chest voice musculature and cricothyroid would be the head voice musculature. And when you go across the break, you are said to be cricothyroid dominant because the cricothyroids are elongating the vocal fold. They're thinning its mass. And that's what is giving you the full sound up high, because when you learn to do that, the vocal fold can still stay adducted or closed. That is said to be cricothyroid dominant. But here's the thing. When you're below the break, the cricothyroid muscles are still active. And they're in fact even a little bit active all the way down to, for example, with a tenor, G3. So just so we know what we're talking about here. This is G3. This is middle C. This is G4, which you said you thought was your break. Well, if that is the break, then this area here would be the zona di passaggio, or so-called mix range. But I said too that some people say that this area above the break is mix range. But if we're saying that because it's mix, because there's both head voice and chest voice activity, well, we have head voice and chest voice activity all the way down to G3 as well. But this is never referred to as mixed voice, right? But strictly speaking, it is, because you do have some amount of cricothyroid activity until you get down to that G3, and then you go down into the area where there's no cricothyroid activity really to speak of. I do hope that helps. I know it was a little bit more technical than sometimes I answer, but there you have it. Ask a question around the break, and it gets a little bit dicey, but please feel free to follow up on any of these things in the comments. And don't be surprised if you find that I've grabbed that and put it into the next questions from comments. I do appreciate all that you've had to say. Thank you again for watching. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. Do subscribe if you haven't yet. We really appreciate that. And hopefully I'll see you again. Bye.